Hello, I'm Catherine Klein. I'm the Vice Dean for Social Impact at Wharton, and I'm delighted to be here today with Francis Guattari. Francis is the Chief Executive Officer of the Rwanda Development Board and a cabinet member in the government of Rwanda. He served previously as Principal Private Secretary to the President of the Republic of Rwanda and also as the Chief Economist and Deputy Head of Policy and Strategy in the Office of the President of Rwanda. So, Francis, thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's wonderful to have you here. So, we want to talk today about business in Rwanda and development of business in Rwanda. A common phrase we hear in the United States and around the world is Africa is open for business. Certainly Rwanda is open for business. Before we get into talking about business in the private sector in Rwanda, I think it may be helpful for our listeners and viewers to hear more about Rwanda itself. As I know you know, when we say Rwanda and people think of Rwanda, unfortunately, what comes to mind for many is the tragic history of the genocide in 1994, and they may know little else about Rwanda. So what should people know about Rwanda today?
Thank you very much, Catherine. I think people need to know Rwanda as a new Rwanda. In fact, when we talk about Rwanda now, it's almost as if Rwanda had a new beginning starting in 1994. And since then, we have had, let's say, a rebirth of a nation. Because what many people around the world will always remember is that in 1994, our country, Rwanda, had a terrible genocide, 1 million people killed, 3 million people displaced internally, others outside as refugees, infrastructure destroyed. It was a failed nation without governance or any economy to talk of. Since then, we have a new country, thanks to the leadership that was able to recover the country and restore its economy and restore the confidence of the people and return the refugees and put back safety and security of property and people. Now we have an economy that is fully functional, that has more than 4 times grown what it was then. And in fact, a country that we believe is beginning to show signs, very strong signs of takeoff into, I would say, a different stage of development. So the idea of Rwanda being open for business is not just an idea, it's a reality. Yeah. And this is as a result of both, public sector and private sector.
Right. And Rwanda is actually one of the fastest growing economies in the world, not only in Africa, but in the world.
That's correct. In fact, over the last 15 years, Rwanda has featured among the fastest growing economies. In the last 10 years alone, we have had economy registering on average 8% growth of GDP. And we have seen that translate into the per capita income of our citizens more than 400%. In fact, we just had new statistics coming out. For the last 3 years alone, we have had more than 600,000 people lifted out of poverty as a result of some of this economic growth that we are seeing.
Yeah, huge success story. So you are the Chief Executive Officer of the Rwanda Development Board, so the RDB. Tell us what the RDB is. What is the mission of the RDB?
So the RDB, or the Rwanda Development Board, has a very simple and straightforward mission. It was created as a result of a recognition that our continued economic growth requires big involvement of the private sector. And so the requirement then for private sector investment was how best can we facilitate private sector investment. And RDB was created as this one-stop center that would then act as the single stop for every private individual or company that wants to do business in the country with 3 objectives. One, to service the entire life cycle of a business, so from registration, licensing, facilitating the acquisition of utilities and whatever is required to start a business, that it would all be done in one office. The second thing then would be to engage into the kind of reforms that are required to develop competitiveness in the economy. By looking around the world for the best practices, how best could we turn Rwanda into a competitive environment to do business? And then the third one was then to facilitate these businesses into contributing to continued growth in terms of exports, in terms of attracting more investments into the country, and participating in the overall economic life of the country. And that's what we do on a daily basis at RDB. Yes.
And I know that Rwanda has risen very rapidly up the ease of doing business index. And that's partly because it's so easy to open a business and register a business in Rwanda, correct?
It is correct, but more than that. You see, about 2008, it came to our attention that there are a number of international best practices in facilitating businesses. And we particularly picked the World Bank Doing Business report that caught our attention. At that time, Rwanda was featuring about 145th place out of about 890 countries that are usually surveyed. And we took it upon ourselves to have every year a reform agenda that would improve measuring ourselves against the best practices to aim at getting among the top 10. I'm very happy to inform you, Catherine, that since then, 2008, Rwanda has improved across the board from 145th to about 42nd, as we are talking about today. So tremendous improvement. But beyond that, the reform agenda also captures many other issues that businesses are interested in that help them become competitive and run profitable businesses. Some are captured by the World Economic Forum report. Some are captured by the global profitability indices. Some are captured by Gallup polls. Some are captured by international governance indices, all of which add up together to form a very competitive business environment that we think today is among the best that people, particularly business people, should look at more favorably.
And I love this description that you've given us because it's so typical of what I've observed in Rwanda of having very specific goals, very clear metrics, a big vision and accomplishments to those. And the ease of doing business index is just one example of that approach.
It is, but also that whole culture of having targets and working towards them is one that permeates across the entire society of our country. In fact, in the public sector and government in particular, we have a process that we call imihigo, which loosely translates into being performance contracts, where every institution of government, management of the institutions, staff, and everyone must have a performance contract that first articulates what they aim to achieve, the resources that are required to achieve that, and accountability associated with achieving that. That is what is helping us to achieve many of our targets that we set ourselves to.
Right. And as you know, I often bring Wharton students, MBA students, to Rwanda, and they're astonished by Imihigo and what this says about the country's culture.
It's a very important principle because even when people don't achieve the targets they have set themselves at, the process that people go through aiming at achieving their targets, however ambitious they may be, is very important and eventually also results into a culture that is results-oriented. Yeah.
Right. I have to say that I'm not only the Vice Dean for Social Impact at Wharton, I'm a professor and I'm an organizational psychologist, and we know from abundant research that goal setting is hugely effective in motivating people and improving performance, and Rwanda does it remarkably well. I want to shift the conversation a little bit to your role in attracting foreign business, foreign investors to Rwanda, and explore with you what are your goals in that area and barriers and opportunities you are experiencing as you try to bring in, as I said, foreign business and investors to Rwanda.
Two goals we have, since we were talking about goals earlier. One is to increase the component of our GDP that is private sector investments. Every year, we want to make sure that as the economy grows, the role of the private sector is not only growing, but it's also significantly growing enough to take on a larger share of our economy. As you know, when you're starting at a low base in development, you have to have a lot of investments by the public sector in infrastructure, in education, in health, and others. But with time, we realize that it's very important that the private sector continues to take on increasingly more role. So that's one. The second one is we realize the limitations of mobilizing domestic capital and also aim to increase the foreign direct investment into the economy so that it can have that push for takeoff as we aim to transform our economy. And so currently, we aim to reach over 10% of our GDP as foreign direct investment by the year 2020. We aim to achieve over 30% of private sector investments into the economy by 2020. And those are targets that inform what I do on every day. With that, then we translate into how much we want to raise on an annual basis. And we have got a target of growing private investment by a factor of 20% on an annual basis to reach the kind of targets we have set for ourselves.
So ambitious goals. And can you describe the successful elements, the things that are attracting investment, and where you're finding barriers? So in what areas are you succeeding? How are you succeeding in attracting investment? And what are the barriers you find in attracting investment in Rwanda in the private sector?
What I am finding is that our biggest success actually comes as a silver lining around our challenges. For example, Rwanda is 12 million people, but within a larger environment of East African community of over 145 million people. And so what previously had been seen as a small economy has now become a large economy that is attracting businesses into Rwanda as a way to also operate into the wider East African community. So the market size, and especially...
So it's more than just Rwanda. It's Rwanda as an entry point into the East African community.
Into the East African community. So 5 countries. In fact, more than that into the common market of Eastern and Southern Africa with more than 400 million people that we are also part of. And so by making Rwanda a core advocate of regional integration and also being seen to actually participate actively in that, we have expanded the market reach for any business that comes into Rwanda. And that's building on what would have been initially seen as a challenge of our economy. The second thing is, as we are building our economy, the core infrastructure that is required for businesses to succeed, like energy, transport infrastructure, education and skills training, and all those things that are critical for businesses to succeed, have become the core business sectors that we have seen businesses participate in by opening private universities, private companies going into training, private companies going into infrastructure construction, into energy generation. And so translating what previously could have been seen as disadvantages into business opportunities that are also championing growth.
Right.
And on top of that...
So interesting, right? You're describing a virtuous cycle of businesses investing to create businesses that grow, that allow other businesses to grow.
Absolutely. Right. And that's how we see building competitiveness in the sense of, one, providing the kind of infrastructure that is important for businesses to build on. And then on that platform, the businesses begin to access the markets and become profitability. So as a result of these initial investments, you're seeing other sectors emerging in the financial services sector, for example, because of this wider market that are looking for a hub, an area where they can consolidate themselves and service the wider region. Tourism, because of the peace and security dividends you have seen in our country and the region as a whole. Tourism continues to be the fastest growing sector in our economy. In fact, this last year alone, more than $305 million as a result of tourism making it the largest export, actually, for our country. And so you're seeing both the foundational infrastructure for businesses turning into business opportunities that are making it attractive for investors, and on top of that, having all these what we call the growth sectors of our economy also growing quite significantly.
Right.
Yes.
So this sounds very, very successful. Do you find that for some business leaders, for some investors, there's an issue of mindset, that they think more of Rwanda as a place maybe to visit or a place to help, but not a place to come and do business? Do you have to change people's mindset about Rwanda?
There is a perception issue overall about the African economies, about risk. And a lot of what we see is risk as a perception rather than risk as real risk of doing business. And so there's an enormous amount of work that we put into demonstrating that Rwanda is a place that you can do business and that you can realize your business growth aspirations. But we also realize that there are many people that see not just Rwanda but Africa as a place to help. Especially this is true with many successful business people who are high net worth, have achieved certain success in life and want to give back to society, often are attracted by the desire to contribute. And what we are saying to them is that this is very good because philanthropy is good and this desire to help others and lift lives is very important, but that we can actually do it using kind of hybrid business models that you can help while you are creating employment and as a result contribute to the sustainable growth of the economy.
Right. Sounds like you're talking about impact investing and other strategies to grow business as a means of social impact.
I guess that's what you call it, Professor Klein, because as a way of investing into lives, into initiatives that will create impact in people's lives, while at the same time getting back the returns on the investments on commercial basis, is very, very good win-win situation for everyone.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So, Francis, a final question for you. As you reflect on Rwanda's 21 years since the genocide, what are you most proud of? Whether you as an individual, you as a head of RDB, or just or you as you think about the country, tell us what you're proud of?
The unity of purpose of the Rwandan people, because you see, it's not every society that has suffered a genocide. It's a devastating, destructive experience that shatters society from its core. To see a people come back together and have a common identity as Rwandans and begin to aspire for self-improvement as individuals, to cater for their families, and begin to invest in long-term, and by so doing collectively contribute to the rebirth of the nation that we are seeing as Rwanda. I'm extremely proud of that. And it's the single thing that I believe is really happening and changing the story of Rwanda today.
Great. Thank you so much for being with us. And I have to say personally, as somebody who's visited Rwanda many times, I've seen that spirit and that unity of purpose, and it is very, very impressive and very inspiring. So I'm so glad you could be with us today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.